He's been nonverbal his entire life. And we adjusted him. The second time I adjusted him, he went home and the mom said, we sing a lullaby every night. You know, his whole life, we sing the same lullaby. That night, he sang the lullaby with her. First time he'd ever spoken.
So kick them rocks. If you don't like how I talk, I'ma keep on talking and walk my walk. Let the haters talk, let the rumors fly. I ain't got time to wonder why. The good Lord knows the man I am, and I'll die standing tall with a mic in my hand. You can kick rocks if you don't like how I talk. I'ma keep on talking and walk my walk.
Hey everybody, Dr. Baker here with me. Awesome chiropractor, Dr. Haig John. I got a ton of questions. This guy's got a lot of really cool stuff going on. Doc, first of all, like I just mentioned to you, I'm looking through your website, Instagram. You got a truck with a gigantic spine. When I say gigantic, I mean it's a Toyota Tacoma, and the entire bed has a spine in the back.
Yeah.
Vertebrae are what, like 2.5 feet wide?
It's a Tundra. It's 8 feet long. There's an extra vertebra. You know, it's supposed to be lumbars, but it was designed by a local artist. He sculpted the whole thing. We've had that, you know, cruising around town for, I think it's the past like 14 years. We're redoing the graphics on the side. It's been a lot of fun. Kids love it, and, you know, it's recognizable. Plus, we're supporting local artists, and it's become like a landmark in town.
So it's got 6 lumbar. I do patients have 6 lumbars, but it's not like that's completely unheard of.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Hey, would you tell me
A lumbarization of the sacrum is what it was then. There we go.
Hey, would you tell me about the seminar that you guys have coming up? What are the seminars that you do? Why do you do them? What's covered? And then I want to dive into some pediatric chiropractic stuff.
Great. Thanks for asking. And, you know, I developed a technique in adjusting analysis called Innate Adjusting. And we did that with working really to safeguard our astronauts in zero gravity. I know it sounds really out there. I live on the Space Coast, and, you know, this technique it's gentle and very effective. And at first really is designing this for astronauts. And you think about in zero gravity, you do a really in-depth toggle recoil or structural adjustment, that bone might end up in Mars before the astronauts. So we developed something where there's less force that we can care for these God's people traveling off Earth and, you know, doing some crazy, you know, amazing mission work. And so I also speak at, there's a conference in DC, International Space Development Conference, their 44th, and they've invited me for the second time to speak. But we developed newborn adjusting from that zero gravity adjusting over 20 years. And now we're teaching innate newborn adjusting and subluxation analysis. We just had to postpone our seminar at Sherman this past weekend due to weather. I mean, they can't handle 4 feet of snow. If I'm in Florida, we would never be able to handle it here. We're postponing that. We're doing Life University April 25th, and it's a gentle approach to serving the most delicate of our patients, and where children need to be cared for. But birth trauma, we wrote a book on a first-hour paper on birth trauma and the role of chiropractic care. And, you know, we've industrialized birth, we're industrialized life. Ultimately, the babies get punished, and we see a lot of the subluxations we see in our offices started back at birth. Someone yanking and pulling, cesarean, vacuum extraction, they're ripping kids out by their neck. And you think about a vacuum extraction, what is that, like a noose pulling around the neck and subluxating these children, really making a conscious effort to care for that baby that may be minutes on this earth outside of mommy, minutes born. You know, the long-term goal is to really see chiropractors in labor and delivery around the world. And could you imagine seeing the rates of cerebral palsy decrease? And these are all research projects we're going to do, or the rates of SIDS decreasing. Now with the vaccine information out there, I guarantee you we'll see a lower rates of SIDS in the world, and especially in the United States. But could you imagine if chiropractors properly trained, adjusting upper cervical or cervical vertebra or the rest of the system, and how lives would change with that, let alone adjusting mommies as well. So that's the basis really of innate newborn adjusting and subluxation analysis. We also do adult adjusting as well, and innate adjusting. Right now we're doing newborn.
Doc, there's a lot for me, I think, to unpack right there. So definitely want to spend some time talking about the technique you're doing with babies, keeping in mind that we're talking to a lot of chiropractors. And I think as a chiropractor of 15 years, I adjust a lot of babies. I may not share my story today with my son, but my son was not breathing at birth, gave him his first adjustment, took his first breath. So I recognize the power of adjusting a baby for sure. But I will be honest with you, I when I get newborn babies, I always kind of think to myself, could I do more? Could I do something different? Maybe there's a better way to do this. Am I really the authority? And so I want to talk about that today and really maybe even just give some like granular, like do this, do that to some chiropractors today, which would be cool. But I want to back up. Can we go back to adjusting people in space? Are we talking like you're chilling on a rocket ship and they're floating around and you're grabbing them and setting houses, or what? Break this down for me.
Right now we're in research phase, and it's been 20 years really just to get recognized and get invited to some of these events. Because, like I live on the space coast of Florida. I'm seeing rockets go up all the time. And, we have recreational travel space travelers, right? Billionaires and people that can afford 100,000, maybe, I don't even know how much it costs to fly like that right now, commercially, to enjoy themselves. Massive amount of force and G-forces compressing the spine, zero gravity decompressing the spine, and then coming back to gravity through that, coming back to Earth. So that's the first one in tourism type of space travel. Pre and post, we want to check those spines because it is a hard thing on the vertebral column, period. Let alone if you think of a subluxation, a vertebra out of place, right? And then those compressive and decompressive forces, we really don't know what's going on. Most of the research has been done on demineralization and all that type of stuff. It takes a chiropractor to really understand the vertebral column properly and the central nerve system and how it's affected in gravity, because we see gravity's effect on the vertebral column every day, on just Earth's gravity, compressing of discs, degeneration in the bones, the discs, and everything else. So, where we bring that into space, we have now teenagers being trained for flights to Mars, whether we might not know we have many space stations up in space, but they're definitely planning them. So when they're in that zero gravity environment, want to make sure, because Wolff's Law will change the shape of the vertebra or any bone based on its function. Structure determines function. And if that change in shape happens, you're in space for 6 months or 9 months or even 1 month, what happens to the end plates of that of the vertebra itself as compared to the disc, or even how the facets are? We need to research that properly with the perspective of a chiropractor, which what we're doing, that understands the structure and function. And I'm sure the spine surgeons and those guys, they have a good understanding. Chiropractors just look at things a little bit more differently in how we approach the vertebral column itself. And then bringing that back down to earth, I created another technique. We call it anchor release. For space, we call it zero gravity because it's a lot of fun, but really we call it anchor release on terra firma here. It's an approach where we are connecting to the stretch receptors itself to give them permission to release. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of force and the vector that we use of that input, because your genius, God created within us, our innate intelligence, knows where the system is supposed to be. We don't really do the adjusting. BJ and DD said that. We offer the force and the influence, but innate knows where that bone is meant to be in the perfect time, and not a moment before, not a moment after. So that's how we approach that work, bringing it back down to earth, and then also applying it to children and newborns.
I hear you that like we're doing the research on space stuff. I agree that chiropractors should be on the forefront of that. But real talk application in the future, what is your vision with that? Is that some sort of spinal hygiene thing that they're doing in space? Is it adjustments before and after they leave? Or is there something that what do you see there?
You hit it all. That's one thing we want to see, is that pre and post, right? Where we're checking the vertebral columns, making sure everything's healthy to travel, which they do with their doctors, but in a chiropractic perspective, lining up the vertebra, adjusting the subluxation, checking them again when they return to Earth. And very soon, if people don't realize, even if I came out to see you or fly out to California or Europe, we're going to go in low orbit space travel and back down. That's how these military missiles get to their targets so quickly. We're going to do the same thing in consumer travel very, very soon because it's quicker and more fuel efficient. So even just regular travel, we want to make sure people can handle that with their vertebral column and live healthy, vibrant, fulfilled lives. I've spoke to quite a number of astronauts that end up with severe back pain the rest of their life because they weren't looking at that subluxation prior to their flight. Then we look at this long-term travel, training a flight crew. If we can train 6, 8 people, whoever's flying up there, to really care for themselves, care for the other passengers, you can have botanists, engineers, whatever, mechanical people that have just a multitask. So you're not adding any payload to because every gram is hundreds of thousands of dollars to lift off the Earth. So each one of those people can care for their neural system and the vertebral system properly for long-term space travel. 6 months to Mars, who knows how long they're going to be out there. And, some groups, they're going to send drugs and antibiotics and all those type of things and pain relievers. Who knows what they send up? Ultimately, those things become precious. They don't want to use them. And I know chiropractic isn't for symptom relief, but helpful keeping people well to maintain their supply as long as possible in every aspect. So there's multiple ways of really looking at this is pre and post, like you said, for consumer travel, for space exploration, long-term travel, those type of things, and having an efficient system to care for each other. And then also when they return back to Earth, and then the analyzation of what's happening to their vertebral column properly for long-term space travel.
That's cool, man. Let's go back to babies.
Got it.
You got any stats on birth trauma, on C-sections that lead to different health conditions or anything like that?
A lot of those statistics of this causes that are almost obviously cut out. It's not easy to find exactly, this was the procedure of, and I could understand that. We don't want to, some groups don't want to show those statistics. But when we look at things like what came up was, and maybe this is well known, I have never heard this before, that when a woman gets an epidural, which is, there's no statistic that I found really of the percentage in the country, but when they get an epidural, there's a much higher probability of a mechanical birth, which either means cesarean, vacuum extraction, or forceps. So, which is traumatic for the child, traumatic for the mother. The probability of, I hate to say it, but infant and maternal mortality actually increases exponentially from that. So, and the reason why that happens is because the mother's fever, the core temperature starts to change. It gets higher. So that causes the mechanical birth. And then we see like 90% of the children that are born. They did a research study with 100 children, and then they saw cranial malformations. In the New England Journal of Medicine, there is upper cervical trauma of, I believe it was like 70 or 80 children. Forgive me, I don't have the stats right in front of me, but it's in our paper. And we're rolling that paper we're about at 10 chapters right now, into a book about birth trauma that's never been written before, but it's really a perspective of the chiropractor. And right now, kind of the working title is, birth trauma and the role of chiropractic care. That, to me, it doesn't sound necessarily like a New York Times bestseller, but who's going to buy the birth trauma book? But it's what every mom and dad needs to know. I didn't know all these things. And my daughter, she was sunny side up. This is our first child. We worked 8 years of really working hard. Some of that works pretty good, but trying to have a baby. And ultimately, that baby, she was sunny side up, caught on my wife's pubic bone like this, and severely traumatic. The frontal bone was pushed way back. It took a lot of cranial work and very delicate work for actually that to come back to normal. Plus, the tens of thousands of children that I've seen in the same way, that pressure on the meningodural system, the brain and spinal cord and the dura, is tremendous. They keep that their whole life if it's not properly addressed by a well-trained chiropractor. And locally, we talk to a lot of I know all the doctors, chiropractors around town. We're all friends. And I even tell them, like, listen, if you have a pregnant mom or a newborn that's in an auto accident, a lot of people do PI work. I do some, but I say, listen, I don't want to take anything away from you, but if you're not comfortable with that, just send them to me and let's get them well, because I want them properly cared for. That newborn and the mom, she just gave birth, for goodness sake. She needs very specific type of care. So one of my goals right now is to help the docs that have been maybe in the PI world for their entire career and want to start seeing babies, but that might not be in their tactile senses yet. So it improve them and uplift them. For even the new grad that really wants to, spend some time and working on with newborn children, raise them up. Because the stats, when I see these things, the numbers are really outrageous. And then relating that back to space, just give you that one. If 90% of the astronauts have gone through and survived birth trauma, and the potential for cranial malformation and upper cervical subluxation is very high, if that was a piece of equipment, they would replace it. If that happened 90% of the time, right, they would find new manufacturers and never go to those other ones again. So we're looking at the most delicate system in a spacecraft, the delicate system in our society, which is newborns and then the astronauts. We are really working to have healthier people especially in the United States of America, but really worldwide.
Well, Doc, there's a statistic that I think belongs in the book. I'm sure probably is. But the United States, if we look at the top 33 industrialized nations, we're 33rd. So there's, I believe, 31 or 32 other countries where it is safer to have a baby. And when I say we're 33rd, I mean we are 33rd in neonatal mortality. So as you're talking about pulling a baby out by the heads, vacuuming, forceps, whatever, something is not working. Whether it's the birth trauma to the spine, which is obviously, in our opinion, number one, or vaccinating them for ridiculous things on day 1 and 2 months, etc. More babies die here than in 30 plus other countries that have the same amount of money, same resources, same everything. So somebody's doing it better than us. And why not have chiropractic be at the forefront of that? So let's go back to chiropractors being in every delivery. Like, what would that look like? And what are your thoughts on that?
You hit on something very, very important. I would love to, could you imagine? I mean, it's almost, we're at the bottom of the list. In Cuba, it's safer to have a child in Cuba. Your potential for survival is higher on a tiny little Caribbean island. I was in Cuba last year on a mission with Peter Morgan and our friends at New Beginnings. It's not an industrialized country. It's people are barely surviving in some of those places. And it's safer to have a baby there than it is in the United States of America, the most amazing country in the world. And, let's put also with that maternal mortality, infant mortality and maternal mortality, we're the worst in the world. And we flip-flop between, we've seen like 50 industrialized countries. You mentioned 33, but we flip-flop from 50 and 49 with mother and baby mortality, which is horrendous. That's a statistic that every parent or every human being should be fighting for the lives of these children, because the part that's not in that statistic is the cerebral palsy, birth trauma causing, ischemia or lack of blood to the brain. And then we have someone that needs a lifetime of support. We take care of a lot of cerebral palsy children. And a lot of that work that I'm talking about with space and newborns, I relate right back to cerebral palsy, where people, some of them burning 4,000, maybe 5,000 calories a day just to function, and bodies in tetany. And the work that we're doing is actually helping them relax and be a little more at ease, because some of them, it's a lot of pain and things they go through. And then we think about SIDS and infant mortality. SIDS isn't always in that statistic where, it could have been the cause of that traumatic birth. 3 or 4 or 5 days later, we find an infant that's not breathing. I don't even want to say the word because it makes me sad, but we could save countless lives. We don't even know how far reaching the things we think, say, or do could change the lives of millions tomorrow. BJ Palmer said that. But I think the concept would be overwhelming if we see these children get healthy. You mentioned the vaccines, and I've done workshops I put on seminars, and we things like that, and I know you have too. And I've invited Dr. Brian Hooker out to our seminars, and he's been our speaker. And he is the researcher for Children's Health Defense, MAHA, and he's done amazing work. And he wrote the book Vaxxed or Unvaxxed with Robert F. Kennedy, Secretary Kennedy now. And I use that book daily. I give it to my patients. We reference it, and people ask me about, should I give my child this? Look at that number of mortality based on numbers of, or wounding the child with that vaccine. So you make an educated choice, because it's really, I want people to have a choice. I think they're garbage and they've destroyed humanity, but people have to find that out from themselves. What we tell them is good, but also people have to do the research themselves. Hopefully we'll make better decisions now with a healthier country, and with Secretary Kennedy in our White House.
Well, I think that one thing we didn't talk about is children with autism. And I don't know about you. I personally haven't had that many patients with autism, but the ones that I have had, I have seen the lights start to come on over time as I'm adjusting them. So I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's a place for chiropractic in that too. But when we look at I believe it's now 1 in 31 kids that have autism in the United States, that number is crazy. And that's not even part of the statistic with us having horrible birth experiences in the medical system. And you alluded to it earlier, the medical system has turned birth into some sort of a traumatic experience or some sort of a industrial type of thing. And that's probably the root cause of why we are such failures at it. But what experience do you have with kids with autism and or other conditions that you've treated in your practice? And let me back up, not treated, because as chiropractors, we don't treat anything.
That's right.
Your move interference so the body can heal itself. But what have you seen in regards to other childhood conditions that normally, with left to modern medicine, would be just a train wreck or never get better?
We put some of those stats and things into this book and partly in the paper, from shoulder dystocia. I have one video I teach from in my seminar in Innate Newborn, where a mom, she gave birth at 7 o'clock in the morning, lives an hour away from me. Shoulder was broken, all this problem with this child, Erb's palsy, which means they rip the arm, and the brachial plexus are all the nerves that feed the arms and hands, and rip that brachial plexus, all the nerves from the baby. She gives birth at 7 o'clock in the morning, comes to my office I think she was there by 9:30 in the morning. The woman just gave birth, but she knew how important it was. Get this baby to the chiropractor ASAP, right? It came from me educating her. Also, her 2 kids prior to this one got adjusted at birth. And, this woman, she's like, listen, I haven't slept. I've just had a baby, and I need this baby here right now. So, and we adjusted him. He's a happy, healthy boy. He's about 5 years old right now. But that stuck with me so much, that passion for education is important. When we're uneducated, we're ignorant. People have no idea what I should take a child to the chiropractor. And that's why I post some of the videos of gentle adjustments. And, adults, we have a lot more stress we've lived in life, and the body holds that garbage in our systems. A newborn doesn't have that. It's a light touch to make that change. And just going back to the autism part, like I said, Dr. Hooker, he is the researcher, writer, he's a PhD, and he has an adult autistic child. Constant care. These people have to give them constant care. It's a life-changing thing, that it's not just the child that's wounded, it's the entire family that has to deal with that now. And we take care of quite a number of autistic children. Cerebral palsy as well is the one that I really see, great change. And when we see autistic children that have musculoskeletal issues, function, movement issues as well. I've seen children. We had one boy, he was about 14, I think he was. And the mom said, we don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. The father is internal medicine. He was a medical doctor. And they said, let's just go to Haig, because over 21 years, I've built a reputation as the newborn or the child chiropractor. At 15, they brought him in. He's been nonverbal his entire life. And we adjusted him. The second time I adjusted him, he went home and the mom said, we sing a lullaby every night. You know, his whole life, we sing the same lullaby. That night, he sang the lullaby with her. First time he'd ever spoken.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. I want to go back. We got to break this one thing down. You can't just say a lady drives an hour to get here after birth. Her son's arms basically hanging out of the socket, and then we adjust him and bam, he's better. You got to go back. Give me a little bit more on this story, right? What does that feel like when a mom brings a baby in and you've got brachial plexus issues, arms dangling, mom's looking at you like you're her only hope. The baby looks like it's been through war, and then you do what? So I'm going to sit on this for a second because there are chiropractors that are going to watch or listen to this, and they're eventually going to have something like this happen. And what this does is it gives them certainty that they can do that, they can help, they can handle it, but they need to hear the whole experience because it's going to happen. Or there's someone on here that's happening to them like, dude, it happened to me too. So break it down more.
I'm glad you asked that because, you know, in a way, I'm talking like I talk to the chiropractors that do this every day sometimes. And when I got that one, I recorded that one actually, where the mom came in with the shoulder dystocia, brachial plexus. And I didn't realize it until the baby's on the table because she just throws the baby to me. I said, okay, you know, let's film this since the baby's a couple of hours old. Let's record it. And then she told me live exactly what was happening. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. My approach didn't change. It's the same approach of checking the subluxation. Where is the body's restricted in that subluxation that's affecting him? How can I improve that? I don't want to make it worse, of course. So it's that palpation, I think, is one of the most important things we have as chiropractors. And there are a lot of great tools out there, Titrons. You can measure temperature. We do that in our class too, with just a surface type of thermometer. Check the temperature, the Atlas, differences from side to side. We want to bring it equal. But you don't always have that tools when you're in a situation where you need to adjust this baby. So our palpation, no matter what, is the most important thing. And that's what we enhance in our seminars as well. So the first thing we had the baby is talk to the mom. What is happening is first, if there's been trauma recently, how was the birth? And I've realized this, she knew what was going on, very aware mom, but moms are in labor. They're in la la land. They're just, get this baby out, right? I go to the dad. I want to ask the dad, because the mom would say usually, oh, everything was fine, vaginal birth, no epidural, blah, blah, blah. And then you look over at the father and it's like, you know, this guy is PTSD after his birth. And oh my gosh, you should have seen it. And they yank this baby. They're pulling. They've got a football player sized MD doctor, all of his weight pulling this baby out with a vacuum stuck to its head. You got to look to the dad sometimes. What is happening? Grandma was there.
I'm going to break this down like I've never adjusted a baby. She brings baby in, you have baby face down and you're palpating the thoracic spine, you have baby face up. Like literally break it down for me. Don't just give me the check for subluxation.
Gotcha. I'm glad you asked that because the first thing is I used to adjust all the babies on top of mommy, laying across her chest because they're in la la land. There's no greater place in the world for a baby than mommy's chest. But then we have mom's breasts are there, baby's really on its back, head turned usually, and their meningodural system isn't at ease, okay? If the head's torqued, that system is already stressed a little bit, especially if they had a traumatic birth. So what I've done is really start my approach with the baby supine, laying on the table with mom or dad or grandma, whoever's there with the baby, with usually the hand on them. Let the baby know that you're there, okay? But that way, I can palpate the cervicals properly with my hands underneath. I can get to the thoracic spine. I usually come from the outside so I can palpate this way, and I can feel how their body is in neutral. And that's very important because the meningodural system, we want to see that in neutral, not in stress or in torque in any way. I want to see what that baby's like right now after this has happened, or maybe my 15th visit with this child. I want to know what has changed. As the head flopping to the side, doesn't want to turn to the right or to the left. I want to feel that when they're in their neutral position. So we do that all the way through. Some of my background is in SOT, and I taught MLS with Arnold Bernier for 10, 12 years. So in MLS, gentle adjusting, meningodural stuff with the cranial and the sacrum. So I bring that all into one approach to serve these children. And now I've noticed even more, we check adults very similarly. And I had a woman just the other day I've been caring for about 16 years, and she just had a hysterectomy. She said, I have to get an adjustment after this. I could barely lay down in any way. And I adjusted her the same way I would adjust a newborn. Tremendous outcomes.
Doc, I'm going to keep pulling you back to this because I'm going to dig
Good,
deep.
keep going. Yeah, I like that.
So the baby's supine, you're feeling the cervicals, you're reaching underneath the baby to really kind of move motion out the thoracic spine as well. When you do that, when you find something in the thoracic spine, are you doing like a baby version of an anterior dorsal, or are you picking the baby up, putting them on your chest and doing an anterior dorsal there? Do you go are they back to prone to adjust that? Walk me through adjusting that. And we're going to spend 5 minutes on this because I want everybody listening to be able to visualize. And I'm not trying to take away from your seminar. I want everybody to go to the seminar. I want them to learn that. But obviously, getting this visualization helps me with the next baby that walks into my office before I get to the seminar. But then it gives me an idea. Wow, I want to go to this seminar to even be able to dial this in tactfully, and not just mentally, visually.
Now, I want to say this and preface it. I'm sure you have a lot of non-chiropractors on your, that follow you, and so do I. And I want to make sure, you have to find the professional that knows how to do this properly. Okay, I'm going to start with that. Now, what we're doing is contacting the vertebra. And now what I've noticed, it's at the stretch receptor of the muscles, because every vertebra has attachments of that's not different when we're newborns or an adult, all those attachments. So what we want to do is connect to the muscle fibers. And now this isn't massage. Massage is for the muscle. Chiropractors adjust vertebra to take pressure off the central nervous system. But what we do is connect to that to actually allow any muscle that might be in tension to release. And how you find that is not from a hard palpation. It's the difference and nuance of vibration. If you think about if a muscle is in tension or in laxicity, it has a different tone than a normal one, just like a guitar string, right? So what we're feeling is that palpation, the difference in tone. D.D. Palmer said chiropractic is based upon tone. You feel the difference in that tone from one to the next. A vertebra itself, the bones vibrate. So enhancing that palpation to feel the difference in tone of vibration, if this bone is subluxated and this is not. And, we're talking about a very small cervical and vertebral column of a newborn. And this also relates to adults as well. This can be directly translated to adults, and it's a lot of the way I adjust as well. But it's that difference in vibration is the first thing that we feel. Now we contact that vertebra, and that contact, it's with the tip of the finger, but it could be wherever you have the best connection. And then what we do is change the vector of influence into that bone. And it's not a hard structural adjustment. What we're actually doing is maintaining a sustained contact, but with the proper vector and force. Because we could just push our finger onto something and put pressure on it. Could be very sensitive to the child. And in reality, you're going to cause a defensive response.
So when you think very vector and force, I'm visualizing are we going through the facet and we're trying to get the facet to release? Am I going through the line of the disc? What do you mean by that?
That's important because that's where our palpation comes from. Is the subluxation PR and PL? It doesn't really give enough. Like the Gonstead's listening doesn't give enough information. So what we're really looking at is what's the subluxation? Where is it? Is it at the facet? Is the vertebra, is it shifted full body to the right, to the left? Is it in rotation? Is it center pivot, body right, body left? Is it, spinous pivot, body right, body left? There's a lot more that vertebra actually moves than just PL or PR or ASRP and ASRL or whatever it is. So we want to actually get an intimate idea of where that vertebra is in space. And Clarence Gonstead said, I become one with the bone. And I've remembered that since maybe first quarter. I've heard that thousands of times, and in my head it became so profound. And this is why it's important for this, because once we put our mind's eye all the way at our fingertips and we match the tone. Now, this kind of answers your question. I hope I am answering it, but that force that we're inputting is matching the tone of resistance from that vertebra. I'm not trying to break resistance like in a structural adjustment. We do that as well, but not on a newborn. So we're matching that tone until the body allows it to release. And you think they haven't had as much stress as you had in your life. We've got stress in our lives. That newborn's had its first stress, which is birthing. This still hasn't developed that defensive system yet. So we're not trying to break defenses at all. We're trying to bring the system to ease.
Got it. Understood. So then walk me through the pelvis and or hips. What are you checking there? Is that adjustment delivered prone? Is it delivered off chest? Are you trying to palpate the SI joints for looking for the same tone?
I used to hold babies and I'd adjust them on my chest. I'd go through 2, maybe 3 shirts a day because, a baby's going to do something. Either it's a diaper blowout, because sometimes when you adjust them, they've been constipated and that baby, something will flow. Or they'll spit up or whatever it might be. So I realized, okay, I can't, I'm not going to, I did that for years. I'm telling you, like 15 years. And in the past 5 or 6 years, I realized that's when I started doing them more prone, that I want to feel the weight of their body. So if they're laying prone and I'm from the outside, I'm palpating a sacrum, I want to feel their body weight and meningodural resistance. So you have the weight, maybe 6, 7, 8 pound baby, and I want to feel how their pressure is, how the sacrum is in that duromeningeal system. I want to see what's happening down there. And then you can also monitor their respiratory response. As they're breathing, how do I feel that in the sacral well with the CSF is flowing at that point? And I want to see how that feels down at the sacrum. Are we getting proper CSF? Or do I feel maybe a base posterior on one side? And very often we see bilateral base posterior on the sacrum and getting very, very little motion in that newborn. And all it takes now I'm saying this is not all that it takes is that adjustment. Once you know what you're feeling and you have a proper understanding of that adjustment or correction, which I don't like using as much, but what I'm doing is bringing ease into that system and working with that respiratory flow and CSF pump of the sacrum and the occiput. And that light input, it might take a little bit more on one side, a little both, bilateral. I might have to change my vectors, okay? So that vector of influence, I need to go inferior or superior or left, right, or however it might be until we dial it into the perfect point. And very often you'll see that baby take a breath at that moment when you're in that right spot and the whole system starts to change. Okay, so a lot of videos in my teaching that show those moments, because at a seminar, you don't have a lot of newborns very often.
And you said baby is supine or prone?
Supine.
Okay, got it. Earlier, I think you said prone. So when you were reaching under, feeling the sacrum, I was trying to figure out what you meant. So
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, they're supine.
You're good. So baby's supine. This whole entire adjustment, baby's supine.
Mostly, yes, correct.
But on the sacrum, you're underneath it. One of the things that I just got from that I think was really great is we all want to know kind of, how do I know, right? How do I know that I made the right adjustment? How do I know that I had a positive effect? And obviously when you know, right? But you don't get that until you've been in practice a long time or done this 100,000 times. So Well, one thing you cued on is when you see a change in respiration and or you feel a difference. Also, thank you for pointing that out because I think that's a really cool thing for a chiropractor to be able to see with a newborn baby.
Now there's some more of that. That's the indicators. If we're not running a Titron, I do also surface EMG in my office. We do palpation, we're checking legs, all those things. A newborn's a little bit different. And I'm so glad you're touching on that because the respiratory part, but you'll see them. And what I look for are the legs opening up. Well, supine, they're going to be like that. Are the legs or like this? Their legs are opening and then they actually end up taking a big, deep stretch. You'll see them take a breath and actually relax. And I do a lot of pointing things out to the moms and dads. Did you see that? The physiology changed. And they'll say, yeah. Or if the baby's crying, I don't mind crying. I had a midwife tell me 20 years ago, if they're crying, they're breathing. Don't worry. Every baby cries. That's their only communication. Of course, we want to soothe. That's not this type of thing at the moment. Moms do that, or dads. Even the baby crying, sometimes you'll hear a difference in the sound of the crying. It's crying of, who is this guy touching me? I've come from my little, safe place at 98.6 degrees with mommy. And we get some irritation. And then they're crying, and then you'll hear the difference in tone, like, okay, this is better. I'm crying because that's what I know how to do. The other part is you'll see them stretch, or mom will pick them up, or I do pick them up sometimes and just change how they are and soothe them a moment, and you'll feel they're at ease because, newborns very often, they're tight. They've been wrapped up for 9 months, and you will see them just relax. And a yawn is a part of that too. And I learned that from Donnie Epstein in Network. I don't practice Network necessarily, but he taught once about this. When they yawn, it's not necessarily people are tired, but they're releasing meningeal tension. And I see that a lot in newborns.
That's cool. Okay, next question. This may be controversial because I've done it. Do you ever take babies, hold them by the pelvis, and hang them upside down so they can get out of gravity? If no, why? And if yes, why?
I am so glad you touched on that because I even mentioned that in my seminar. I don't do that. I don't like to do it necessarily. I never did. And my friends, basically written a book on those things there's Gonstead, and that's what they do. And SOT does some of that stuff. It's not what I like to do at all. I would rather, if they've had a full meal or if they have reflux, because we see a lot of children with reflux and all those other things, a lot of the stomach contents are going to come out. Okay. And you're going to get spit up all over the place. So I've stopped doing those type of things of holding them upside down because I can get more with my palpation and with my mind's eye visualizing where that bone is, and I can feel the nuances. And that's where it's faster for me because this is the other part. You've got to see a lot of people. And high volume is very important in a cash practice. Insurance doesn't pay for anything in the world anymore. And, we have affordable fees and we want to see a lot of people. We care for a lot of our community. So we also have to keep things moving. We can do that adjustment in a few minutes, or not even a few minutes, a couple, and move on and serve more children and change the world, not by how many different procedures or checks can I do. We're going to do the ones that we need. We can be efficient and doing it all supine right there. I'm right there. I can write notes if it's a first exam or second or wherever. I can take notes while I'm doing it very fast. That efficiency is important. So if we want to save the babies, we've got to save a lot of them. And that's my mission, is saving millions of babies.
It's a good mission, man. Walk me through the cervical adjusting. I don't know, but I'm assuming it's very similar to what you're doing with the sacrum and the thoracics. Are you looking at range of motion at all? So one of the things that I do, and again, full transparency, you're the authority. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'll change it today. I'm usually looking to see those that are go all the way to the left and the right equally. If not, then I use that as an indicator that I need to adjust. And that's usually connected to how well they're going to latch on one side versus the other. And then I'm looking at the orientation of, is their head cocked way up like this, or is their chin tucked down? And I'm talking to parents about how to maybe mold that a little bit while they're changing the diaper, if it's way up here or it's way down there. Walk me through the analysis of the cervical spine and or adjusting and explanation with parents.
So those are two separate things, and they're both very important. I'm going to start with the second. when they're throwing their head back, or if you've ever seen a child and they want to throw themselves back when people are holding them, usually they're very irritated and usually have colicky type of symptoms. That's dural meningeal tension. And the head is trying to get closer to the butt, to the sacrum, to shorten that space of dural meningeal tension. And that's something that Marty Rosen touches on a lot in his cranial seminars. I've learned a lot from his seminars. I tell people to go to him all the time. But that is dural meningeal tension. Definitely sacrum, occiput at that point. And that takes the chiropractor, sometimes at occiput, just a light thrust. And we're just doing like this. We're not trying to get a crunch. And that's a light impulse. And they call that an occipital side slip. You'll maybe even see it slips one side to the other. But then it's definitely sacrum when the head's coming back like that. That child has to be adjusted pretty soon. And then the other one you asked me about was adjusting.
Looking left and looking right.
I don't do as much of the turn because I ask the mom, and that's one of the questions. Do you notice that they are more comfortable nursing one side of the breast or the other? And it's like, oh my gosh, she loves the right, doesn't like going to the left. Same thing I ask about tummy time. Oh, she loves tummy time, or they hate tummy time. And that's usually like T1, C7, right? So, asking those questions, and then we do it maybe on the table. I never move the head to the way that it doesn't want to go. What I do is make the adjustment, that gentleness, and we're changing our vector. We have to find the right input point, and very often the head will start to move to that way. And then you'll see the expression on the baby's face is like, oh my goodness, and they feel so much more comfortable to be able to move. It's amazing. But then one thing I also tell parents about this too is that it can be a habit, always going to the right. They're not used to going to the left. We want to make sure you do some play over there, hold some keys, crinkle paper over there, so they just make sure that they get used to turning to the left again. They may have never been able to do that if you want to think about it in that way, right?
Yeah, that's cool. So instead of using the look right, look left as kind of a pre and post check, you're asking the questions and then you're making the adjustment and then just watching how the baby responds and is able to go more that side.
Let's go another layer deeper. In the palpation, we'll feel like a muscle bundle or tension usually at one of the facets. That's where it goes back to the facets. When we talk about facets, that's one area we want to see. That lack of motion in that area, you'll be able to feel it as an inflammatory response there, or a muscle bundle might be in tension, or you'll feel a lot of inflammation around that area in that joint, and then also the restriction. And you could feel that if you just did, a little range of motion in your palpation, you'll feel one side won't move, just like an adult, okay? But what I don't want to do is cause irritation in that direction that's already sore, because then they'll try and avoid it later. Because it caused me pain. You caused me pain forcing my head. I'm not saying forcing, but that's just one of those things we want to influence ease instead of influence where I don't want to turn there now because I know it hurts. You follow that portion of it?
Yeah, that makes sense. As I'm working up from the sacrum up, I hit the neck. Now I have a question for you, and I believe everything's chiropractic, but what is your thoughts? How many more have you seen of tongue tie and lip tie lately in kids? Is there a lot more now than there was 10 or 20 years ago? And why do you think that's happening? And then what does that do to the body? And what is your response to mom and dad as far as action steps typically?
I've seen children that needed it. There are a few tests that you can do. We want to see that. Is that little membrane all the way up? And they can't actually, when you pull their tongue out, does it kind of retract? I have no idea why it's like 5-10 years, so much more lip and tongue tie. Is it true and real, or is it just one of those things like, okay, let's do this now. We're going to go get your tongue tie clipped. What I teach parents is, let's see, everything's working well. Now that the baby is adjusted, subluxations are cleared. We've checked. Now, we're not talking about interoral adjusting. I do a lot of that. That's a level 4 in our seminar. We have 4 levels for certification. Cranial is part of that, but that's more advanced. So we adjust the palate. I don't know if I've ever seen a child that has not had some small degree of TMJ misfunction and syndrome. Check the sphenoid, the hard palate, and then very often that sucking and the reason why they were going to go do that to begin with has all changed. Now everything is better. And we have some great lactation consultants and great midwives and doulas in our area. The one thing is they just know what they know and what they've been taught by other people. So we try and educate them, but they also get their continuing education. Oh, if this isn't happening, you've tried this and this, send them for a tongue tie or a lip tie or something, and it must be the baby's fault, right? And I have to say, we have so many new midwives and doulas in our area that I haven't kept up with, educating them in the past couple of years. But now I've just actually drafted 4 new letters just to send out to everyone in the birthing community, including the obstetricians, is, hey, I'm not trying to tell you to do anything differently. We're not starting a fight over this. We're trying to save babies, and I want to save these children. Send them to me, okay? You got the baby out here. Let's correct all that trauma. After my daughter was born, we were doing a home birth, 12 hours. My wife pushed, let me tell you, I would have been 10 minutes and say, check me out, right? My wife is the toughest human being, pushed for 12 hours, baby sunny side up, forehead stuck on her pubic bone. We transferred to the hospital. I tell this story very often. I've told on stage. I literally took over the emergency room. The doctor said, okay, put up this big bag of Pitocin, blah, blah, blah. Let's get this thing going. I said, oh, no, we don't. Hold on a minute. We're not doing that. The woman I said a whole bunch of other things I won't say on the podcast, but she threw up her hands and said, what do you want me to do? I said, is the baby safe? Yes. Mommy safe? Yes. We're going to wait. Let's see if we have progress now. She's in a different place. That's the proper way to do it. And she said, okay, come back in 15 minutes. It felt like, it was in La La Land at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I said, we will take the teeniest, tiniest, smallest amount of Pitocin. Baby progressed right there. It was perfect. Then afterwards, there was another obstetrician or whatever, talked about the birth, and he sits her on her lap in the NICU. They made her go to the NICU. I went to the NICU. I was saying, no vaccinate. I don't want a needle near this baby. Keep everything away. And I'm ready I'll throw down with anybody that comes close to this child. And I made everybody aware of that. You've got to be vigilant and you got to be tough. And I've spent a lot of time with the vaccine injury groups and Children Health Defense. And I hear these stories from moms and dads. We had the CHD bus come out. We had Zen Honeycutt from Moms Across America. And then we had Dr. Hooker there and the big CHD bus. And I've heard the stories from the moms. I told them not to vaccinate and they did it anyway. We have to be vigilant. That person should go to prison for life, whoever did that. But when I got into the NICU and on my rant, I can't see, I'm stressed and whatever. And the entire NICU were all my patients. And the only one that wasn't my patient I went to high school with, she knows me. She knows what I believe in. And I'm saying my rant, and they had the NICU nurse who was my patient take me by the hand and say, Dr. Haig, it's me. I know what you believe in. I know we're not going to let anything happen to this baby. No one's going to give him a shot. It's okay. And I tell you, I heard angels singing. God put those people in place right there for us in that moment to save my baby. And it was truly amazing. Does everybody have the wherewithal to do that? Not necessarily. What do you do? And, that's the hard part. I feel it was a blessing going through that because I have an insight of what other parents have gone through. My son's home birth was easy. He was out before the midwife came. My daughter was 2 at the time. She was there to witness it, which I thought was beautiful. And, but that was golden. If we didn't have that golden birth, if we had the golden birth the first time, I always say it was a blessing because I get the insights of what other parents may have gone through.
Doc, today's been a great show, man. It's been awesome having you on. I think my favorite part was talking through the adjustment of a newborn. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I want to start trying to just really get more connected with feeling the tone and really treating it like that as far as like what am I looking for and what is the outcome? I didn't even think about the yawn. I didn't think about the additional breath. So all that stuff was gold for me today, man. I really appreciate it. I want to have you back on. I'll reach back out soon and let's talk about more about saving babies and innate, because that's what this whole thing's all about.
Absolutely. And I'll just add one little more part of that. In D.D. Palmer, in my other I have a podcast at Synapse Philosophy Group, and we're reading D.D. Palmer's 1910 book. And right now we're on page 896 out of 1,000. And D.D. Palmer, the section on nerve tracing in this book is what we base innate adjusting on. And what I was just talking about with you about finding that, paying attention to the tone, is how D.D. Palmer's nerve tracing and subluxation, finding subluxations, is pretty much how D.D. Palmer did it. So this is really the foundation, I say the foundation of chiropractic in how we're serving. That's why we named it Innate Adjusting.
Super cool, Doc. Hey, I'll catch you on the other side, man.
All right, brother. Thanks for having me on. God bless you. Have an amazing day.
You too.